Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening. So, this video is among many other videos. It's pretty serious, and it's about the homelessness crisis that is happening here in Los Angeles, California. And so, it's gotten so bad that there are diseases that are breaking out, and it's even a risk when you're going into those areas if you're trying to help someone or if you're just walking past areas that have homeless encampments. And so it has become a health risk. So medieval diseases are infecting California's homeless. And so this is an article, and I know I had posted it, but I don't know that anybody actually really took it serious enough. But this poses as not only the sadness that there's so many people that are becoming homeless, and you have different levels of homelessness, but that disease is starting to take hold, and it's in Los Angeles, in cities, and it isn't just relegated to just Los Angeles, Skid Row. So it has been spreading in parts of Los Angeles. And so it's becoming a huge issue, and even an issue where political figures such as, Donald Trump have spoken recently on the issue, and there have been mayors, Gil Garcetti, I believe that's his name. He's also made comment on the issue more recently. So it says typhus, tuberculosis, and other illnesses are spreading quickly through camps and shelters as well. So this article, even though it was put out in March 8th, 2019, it's really relevant as to what is going on right now. It has not gotten any better. It's actually, in fact, a lot worse. So this is by an Anna Gorman and Kaiser's Health News. Okay. And so Jennifer Miller keeps trash bags and hand sanitizer near her tent, and she regularly pours water mixed with hydrogen peroxide on the sidewalk nearby, keeping herself and the patch of concrete she calls home clean is a top priority. And so you even have homeless people who, if they're recently homeless or if they're not really as ill or sick as others, are trying to keep from getting the sicknesses. But this homeless encampment off of Hollywood freeway ramp is often littered with needles and trash and soaked in urine. Rats occasionally scamper through the millers that Miller fears that this is the consequences of being homeless. So I did tell you that it's even outside of parts of it's in sister cities of Los Angeles. So this is talking about Hollywood, and Hollywood definitely has homelessness. So it goes on to say, I worry about all those diseases, said Miller. She's 43 years of age who has been homeless most of her life. So infectious diseases, some that ravage populations in the Middle Ages, are resurging again, but here in California and around the country as well, and are hitting homeless populations especially hard because of a lack of health care and cleanliness in the environment. So Los Angeles recently experienced an outbreak of typhus, so a disease spread by infected fleas on rats and other animals in downtown Los Angeles. So officials briefly closed part of the City Hall building, which is littered with homeless encampments as well, and rats and rodents that had invaded the building. So people in Washington state have been infected with Shigella bacteria, is what it's called, which is spread through feces and causes diarrhea, disease, and shingullosis, as well as Bartonella quintana, or a trench fever, which spreads through the body, lice. Okay. Um, so hepatitis A is also spread primarily through feces, infected more than 1,000 people in Southern California in the past 2 years. So the diseases also had erupted in New Mexico, Ohio, Kentucky, primarily among people who are homeless or use drugs. So public health officials and politicians are using terms like disaster, public health crises to describe the outbreaks, and they are warning that the diseases can easily jump beyond the homeless population to, that is, people who aren't homeless. So our homeless crisis is increasingly becoming a public health crisis. So California Governor Gavin Newsom said that his state of the state speech in February, citing outbreaks of hepatitis A in San Diego County, syphilis in Sonoma County, and typhus in Los Angeles County. So this is spreading to other cities, and it is becoming a huge problem. So typhus, he said, it's a medieval disease in California in 2019. Okay, so the diseases have flared as the nation's homeless population has grown in the past 2 years. About 553,000 people were homeless at the end of 2018, and nearly one quarter of homeless people live in California. So the disease is spread quickly and widely among people living outside or in shelters held along the sidewalks contaminated with human feces, crowded living conditions, weakened immune systems, and limited access to health care. So the hygiene situation is just horrendous. For people living on the street, says Glenn Lopez, a physician with St. John's Well Child and Family Center who treats homeless patients in LA County. It becomes just like the third world environment where their human feces contaminate the areas where they are eating and sleeping. So those infectious diseases are not limited to homeless populations, Lopez warns. Even someone who believes they are protected from these infections is not. So at least one Los Angeles city staffer said that she contracted typhus in City Hall last fall. So in San Diego County, officials warned in 2017 that the diners at a well-known restaurant were at risk for hepatitis A. So there were 167 cases of typhus from January the 1st of 2018 through the February 1st of this year, up to about 125 in 2013 and 13 in 2008, according to California Public Health Department. So this has been a long-running problem, and it has gotten only worse. It's growing. So typhus is a bacterial infection that can cause a high fever, stomach pain, chills, but can be treated with antibiotics. Outbreaks are more common in overcrowded and trash-filled areas that attract rats. So the recent typhus outbreak began last fall when health officials reported clusters of flea-borne diseases in downtown of LA and Compton as well. They have also have occurred in Pasadena, which you'll never hear about Pasadena because they make it seem like everything is clean. Well, it is spreading everywhere. So it has also happened in Pasadena, and it has happened in even other places outside of that city as well. So where the problems are likely due to people feeding stray cats carrying fleas. So last month, the county announced another outbreak in downtown of LA that infected 9 people, 6 of whom were homeless. And after city workers said that they saw rodent droppings, and this was in City Hall, Los Angeles City Council President Herb Wesson briefly shut down his office to rip up the rugs. And he also called for an investigation and more cleaning. So hepatitis A is caused by a virus usually transmitted when people come in contact with feces of infected people. So people recover on their own, but the disease can be very serious for those with underlying liver conditions. So there were 948 cases of hepatitis A in 2017 and 178 in 2018 and into 2019 as of now. So the state public health department said this. So 21 people have died as a result of the 2017-2018 outbreak. So the infections are not a surprise given the lack of attention to housing and health care for the homeless and the dearth of bathroom and places to wash hands, says Jeffrey Duchin, the health officer of Seattle and King County. So, Washington, which has seen shingleosis, trench fever, and skin infections among homeless populations, it's a public health disaster, Doshin says. New York City, where the majority of the homeless population lives in shelters rather than on the streets, has not experienced the same outbreaks of hepatitis A and typhus, says Kelly Doran, an emergency medicine physician and assistant professor at New York University. But Duran says that different infections occur in shelters, including tuberculosis, a disease, and it spreads through the air, typically infects the lungs. So the diseases sometimes get the medieval moniker because people in the area lived in squalid conditions without having clean water and sewage treatment, says Jeffrey Klausner, a professor of medicine and public health at UCLA. So, public living on the streets in homeless shelters are vulnerable to such outbreaks, such as the weakened immune system, and are worsened by stress, malnutrition, and sleep deprivation. So, many also have mental illness and substance abuse disorders, which can make it harder for them to stay healthy or get health care. So, on one recent February afternoon, Saban Community Clinic physician assistant Nejan Far Farman walked through the homeless encampment in Hollywood carrying a backpack with medical supplies. So she stopped to talk to a man sweeping the sidewalk, and he said that he sees everything and anything in the gutters and hopes he doesn't get sick. She introduced herself to a few others and asked if they had any health issues and needed checking. And when she saw Miller Farman, checked her blood pressure and asked her about asthma and urged her to come see a doctor for treatment for her hepatitis C. The viral infection spread through contaminated blood that can lead to serious liver damage. And so to get these people to come to a clinic is a big deal, a big thing, she said. So a lot of them are disturbed, are distrustful of and distrustful of healthcare systems. So on the other hand, another day, 53-year-old Karen Mitchell waited to get treated for a persistent cough at St. John Wellness Center Child and Family Center's mobile health clinic. And so she also needed tuberculosis tests as required by the shelter where she was living in Bellflower, California. So Mitchell, who said that she developed alcoholism after a career in pharmaceutical sales, said that she had contracted pneumonia and from the germs from other shelter residents. So everyone is always sick no matter what the precaution they take. So during the hepatitis A outbreak, public health officials administered widespread vaccinations, cleaned the streets with bleach and water, and installed hand washing sanitations in bathrooms, stations and bathrooms near high concentrations of homeless populated people. So, but the health officials and homeless advocates said more needs to be done, including helping people access medical and behavioral health care and affordable housing as well. So it really is unconscionable, says Bobby Watts, the CEO of National Healthcare and Homeless Council, a policy for advocacy organization. These are the preventable diseases, okay? They are all preventable diseases, but they're rampant in Los Angeles and other parts, housing the sickest homeless, okay, housing the sickest homeless. And so there's a video that is underneath, and I guess it's related to some of the circumstances that are happening regarding homeless populations in Los Angeles and in other neighboring cities. So it has become a real crisis here where people literally of all walks of life, all ages, all circumstances are usually, you can find people, especially in Hollywood. What I recently noticed frequently, not too long over there, is that people will just lay out on the ground right on the sidewalk and then make their bed there. You know, they'll lay a blanket down, old mattress, and all of a sudden they'll put a tent up and then they'll have clothes, baskets, all kinds of belongings out there. And there's crime, there's violence, there's drug addiction, there's needles laying around in the gutters. There's a lot of prostitution as well, and it's what you call um, prostitution for drug use. And a lot of stuff is happening over on Vine, like between Melrose and Hollywood Boulevard. And so it's really bad over there as well. But this is another related article that has to deal with homelessness. And it's really sad that it's going on, but it is. It says, as homeless are suffering, risk of hepatitis, typhus, and other diseases are growing. Now, this is more recent. This is June 18, 2019. So that's just to tell you that it is not, since then, it hadn't gotten any better. So when it comes to this situation right here, it says Los Angeles, the big city around the country, homeless people scrape by, often in deplorable, unsafe conditions. So the health threat posed by living on the street may not be confined. So from Los Angeles to Kentucky, across the USA, experts said growing homelessness populations are increasingly susceptible to outbreak and contagion disease, including typhus, hepatitis A, and Shigella. So this is a good example of why homelessness is a public health issue, said Elizabeth Bowen, an assistant professor in social work at the University of Buffalo in New York. When people don't have access to basic needs like food, shelter, clean water, and sanitation, people suffer, and population health um, on a whole is worse and off. So dangerous out there. Center for Disease Control and Prevention said Americans with typhoid fever are usually infected abroad. But in LA, a police department employee assigned to the city's traditional homeless epicenter became infected by the bacteria that causes potentially deadly illness last month, and two other employees showed symptoms as well. So the area, known for decades as Skid Row, is overrun with rats um, that feast on garbage left on the streets or in alleyways. So rats are spotted a few blocks away inside City Hall, and in one of the offices, carpeting was removed as a precaution to protect from fleas, which spread typhus or droppings they may have left behind. So it's a little dangerous out there right now, said Gaga Turner, 21 years of age, who said that she has lived on Skid Row for about 3 years. The vermin crawl up everywhere. Okay, so this is sort of like a picture of what kinds of stuff go on when people are out on the street and they have nothing else and nowhere to go and they're sick and they're kind of left to die. So the homeless woman looks on from her wheelchair as others rummage through the belongings in LA. So the city of LA on May 29th agreed to allow homeless people on Skid Row to keep their property and not have it seized. So I don't know if you heard me. I had a video that was saying that Skid Row was, there were people saying that homeless people can keep Skid Row and keep their property there and remain there. And so they had designated a map where they show there's a line drawn in that area where it's just homeless encampments and it's populated, but the crisis is so bad that it is spreading out of Skid Row, and people are concerned that it is not just designated to Skid Row alone, because Skid Row is growing, so to speak, because of this crisis. So Christopher Harris, 58 years of age, a homeless man who lives on Skid Row, said rats and other vermin are a concern, and drinking water and bathrooms are in short supply. So when it's hard to find an available toilet, especially at night, you go where you feel like going, to the bathroom. So he said hand sanitizer is one of the area's biggest needs. And so only blocks from the billion-dollar skyscrapers and government office. Those living in tents or makeshift shelters use small plastic buckets as toilets. And so the waste is transferred into an open 5-gallon pails left on the street corners for crews to pick it up. So for water, some fire hydrants are fitted for fountains that inhabitants line up to use. Okay, so Los Angeles County health officials swept through the districts this month, issuing 85 violation citations, and they asked that the city to provide an adequate number of toilets, hand washing stations, and trash cans. So the county, plagued by low apartment vacancy rates and rising rents. There are apartments that are literally empty because people cannot afford to live in them here in Los Angeles, and it's spreading. It's not just in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, that's what's been going on. The rents are extremely high. So the county, plagued by low apartment vacancy rates and rising rents, saw a 12% increase in its homeless population in its latest count for 2019. So the city was up to about 16% to 58,936, three-quarters of whom live on the streets in cars, on the streets or in cars. So some people live on the streets, some people are living out of cars or RVs, and that it is becoming extremely unsafe. And like little motels and hotels that once were just frequented by like regular people who were like travelers and whatnot, now you have people who are actually utilizing those things as places to stay temporarily, and you move on to the next motel and then become havens for drug people, like drug hubs and people to exploit the homeless and desperate. And so that's what I'm adding in here, what I've seen in all up on Vermont. In the Los Angeles area, you'll see tents as well. If you go further southward of LA and down Vermont, and there's other parts of LA where you'll see homeless encampments under freeways, pockets, little small pockets of tents. And so, in response to the criticism after the report, the LA Mayor Eric Garcetti is what his name is. I kept saying Gil Garcetti. Eric Garcetti is his name. So excuse me if I mispronounced his name earlier on. Said that he has more than double the number being housed in 21,000 to 21,000. So he said the city's homeless budget is about $460 million, which he said is 25 times higher than 4 years ago. So homelessness is not an only problem in LA. Despite the strong economy, the Department of Housing and Urban Development's annual count of the homeless put the population nationally at 552,830 last year, up to about 0.3% from the year before. So the number of unsheltered grew from 194,467 up to about 2.3%. So public health danger, and this is what you're going to see. This is just a small snippet. And so it's a homeless man that adjusts his tent and he's on the street in downtown Los Angeles. You'll see a lot more tents than that, and you'll see a lot more clothes and belongings than that as well. So a hepatitis A outbreak occurred last year in LA, and the contagious illness can cause vomiting, nausea, and jaundice, and it has shown up on the West Coast and around the nation, including Kentucky, Utah, New Mexico, and traced to the homeless and drug use. So after cases of hepatitis A took off in Louisville in late of 2017, the liver disease spread across Kentucky, sickening. It's a liver disease, so it spreads across Kentucky, sickening at 4,000, more than 4,000 people, about half of whom had to be hospitalized and killing at least 43 of them. So hepatitis A is spread primarily through fecal matter and fecal contact. And so through regular hand washing is the chief way to prevent it. Neil Gupta, incident manager for the disease for the CDC in Seattle. He says they go on to say that a single case of hepatitis A in a homeless man sparked a mass inoculation campaign 2 months ago. So last year, Seattle issued a public health warning for the increased levels of group A streptococcal infection, which cause skin irritation and strep throat, and Shigella infections, which cause diarrhea and other gastrointestinal upset. So public health officials tied both of this to the homelessness. People who view homeless encampments as something that's happening to someone else and not affecting the community as a whole are incorrect, so said Steve Byrne, a vice president of Washington based National Alliance to End Homelessness. So the whole community is at risk when you have these kinds of outbreaks. A human tragedy. So downtown LA, the head of Business Improvement District sobbed as she talked about the issue of the government inaction to move on these issues. So it's a disgrace. We are not doing anything to alleviate a human tragedy, said Estela Lopez, executive director of the Central City East Association, so which hires cleanup crews and private security for the businesses in the area struggling to stay afloat. So every day she said that the challenges stack up. It is trash, it's rats, it's unchecked garbage, people using buckets for bathrooms, and it is a threat to public health, Lopez says. So she said that her crew picks up 5 to 7 tons of waste a day. 5 to 7 tons of waste a day, including human excrements and used needles. The city's public works department said it's 149 man crew members and supervisors equipped with face masks, glasses, protective clothing haul away 1,200 tons of trash and debris a month. So sidewalks are steamed, cleaned, and sanitized, but quickly can become dirty all over again. So it's an ongoing battle and an ongoing job. So LA's downtown industrial district business improvement district maintenance supervisor James Blackwell picks up trash in a hotspot inside of an industrial district in downtown LA. So this is somewhat of a homeless encampment right here that you can see, and he's picking up the trash. And I have seen this like every day. This is every day. You'll see people trying to go along, trying to clean up. So it could get worse. It not could, it has gotten worse. So I'm adding that in there. So the city council approved the settlement of a lawsuit brought on by homeless advocates, and that prevents the city from limiting possessions of those living on the sidewalks, tents, and skid row. Opponents of the settlement fear that the piles conceal food, waste, and bolsters the rat population. So that's what people are fighting back and forth. Some say let the homeless keep their belongings, but the people that are looking at this say that it's infested with rats, fleas, and diseases, or it's a haven for rodents and other pestilence and diseases to harbor. So I am afraid for my health and for those who are out there working, Lopez said. The homeless people, the risks are greater. Epidemiologic studies of homeless populations have found higher prevalence of HIV, hepatitis, tuberculosis, and scabies. So in France, doctors found it effective to provide homeless people with vaccinations against hepatitis A and B, influenza, and diphtheria, as well as providing syringes and condoms, according to 2008 study. But no amount of health care can make up for the lack of housing, according to the National Health Care for the Homeless Councils, which states that poor health is a major cause of homelessness and also exacerbated by it. Okay, so, and I hate to say this, but there's a related article that says students sleep in cars and on couches and when they have nowhere else to go. So there's homelessness that is spreading across the nation, even to students homeless in college. That is a related article. So outside of that, the conditions underscore the need to find housing for the homeless, advocate said. So if folks are concerned about their fellow citizens, at all, they will see it's not appropriate for people to be living in their lives outside on the street, said Julia Devonthery. Okay, so this is a staff attorney for the Dignity for All Project, part of American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California. And so these were the unfortunate articles, which are extremely true and an unfortunate truth. There is a human tragedy that is going on in California and outside of neighboring cities of California. There's a large population of homelessness growing, and some of but most of it is there's parts of it that contributes to the housing crises that we're having and the other things that are symptomatic because of this. And so there's also the large numbers of people that are becoming ill from being outdoors, living on the streets with a lack of proper health care. And so, what are your thoughts about this? It's really a sad situation, but it is true. It is happening on the streets as we speak. It is going on right now. And we keep hearing the song and dance from politicians about how they're going to fix the problem, but it only gets worse. It only grows worse and worse and worse. So I would like to say that I'm going to end this video. Um, it's just a sad time we're living in, and that is this is an extension of what is going on, unfortunately. And so I don't know that this will be an easy fix, but it's definitely something that would be um, debatable and also something that needs to be looked at immediately. Thanks for listening.